All right, thank you very much, guys, for attending this session. Before I start, I would like to tell you a little bit how I got interested in this anti-handbook. And so I've been working on the topic of language inclusiveness in Spanish for the last 5 years. And as I was doing research last year, I came across this anti-handbook of the Spanish language. I've been actually looking at lately at how the conversation, the discourse about language inclusiveness in Spanish is evolving in light of how much support we are getting from institutional, entities, right? And actually I have my student here, Sanaya Gabriel, who is an honor student, and she's also looking at that and one aspect of institutional support or lack of it for language inclusiveness in Spanish. So here is what everything about this conversation that probably in the Spanish-speaking world probably is been going on for the last, I would say, 15 years, much more recently that maybe it happened in other languages like maybe Swedish or German or English. So, so this is, what is interesting about this is that you look at this topic and then you realize that really part of the reason why the conversation maybe is moving too slow for some is that there is really a cognitive, if you will, inertia in general, in humanity, right, that focuses our attention on elements that have a dual relationship, a binary relationship. This is inevitable. This is how it happens. I'm looking at you, and what I see is two eyes, two lips, two nostrils, right? So the duality is everywhere in front of us. So why is it relevant to talk about this work? So this is the work that I'm going to discuss today, the anti-handbook of the Spanish language. What you have on the right here is actually the original. We have 8 authors who authored this Antimanual. It was written originally in Spanish, right? And what you have on the right is my translation. I'm right now working on the translation of this work. I got permission from the publisher, who it happens to be the National Autonomous University of Mexico. And this team, that's not what I wanted to do. Right, the team that we have here is a team who is associated with the center, the Research Center for Gender Studies at the National Autonomous University of Mexico. All right, so about this book and why this book is important for this conversation. Any if you will, any artifact, right, that is produced in a community, in this case is the Spanish community, right, is going to have an impact. We don't know how large an impact, but it'll have an impact. And it also, any artifact is going to be born out of some dynamics that have happened in that particular community, right? So it's important when we talk about mostly about anything that involve human beings and groups. It's important to have in mind the notion of system and how everything in a system somehow is related. All the elements in a system are related to one another. And what is important to think about when we talk about systems and think about systems is that a system is a collection of elements that operate in such a way that the end result of all these elements working together is very different from the sum total of what each of these elements can do on their own. So I would like to situate this book, this anti-handbook, in what I would call container system, right? So the first container would be the worldwide Spanish-speaking community is affected by this artifact. Then we have authoritative institutions that will have probably a say or an opinion or an attitude towards this particular artifact. We have within these institutions, this is very important in the Spanish-speaking world, the language academies are, this is, the Spanish-speaking world is very different from the the English-speaking world or other languages. These academies are perceived by these Spanish-speaking communities worldwide as very powerful institutions, as reference that the Spanish-speaking communities go to understand how the language needs to be used, how the language needs to be handled. And also within authoritative institutions, okay, of course, and perhaps fortunately we have institutions of higher education that while they are institutions as well, right, in a way kind of like keep language academies honest, if you will, in perhaps considering what we have in this container, what the actual worldwide Spanish-speaking community think and feel about the language. So, so that is our background. That is our system of containers network, if you will. So, what does language and emotion have to do with one another? This is very interesting to talk about language and emotion at the same time because, as you know, in linguistics, there's kind of like a bias that favors that which is objective, which is scientific, right? So, and just to think about where that bias is coming from, I think we need to go back to Saussure, Ferdinand de Saussure, who, as you know, is one of the fathers of modern linguistics. He started the movement of structuralism. And I want you to think about this quote. He said this at the beginning of the 20th century. No individual, even if he willed it, could modify in any way at all the choice that has been made. Here he's talking about language. And what is more, the community itself cannot control so much as a single word. It is bound to the existing language. This quote is coming from a section in his course in general linguistics, which is it's a reference for any linguist, where he talks about the immutability of the linguistic sign. And so he was thinking here, he was not thinking about emotion at all. He was not thinking about individuality. He was thinking about language in terms of a system that lives by itself outside the brain of human beings, right? Okay, so so this is very interesting to to think about this, to think about language as something that is living outside the brain of a human being, and therefore this, right, the choice that we make once we come to the conclusion that this is what the language is going to look like, that's it, we cannot change it, right? So he was thinking synchronically, right? He was not thinking diachronically, and he was thinking in terms of the language having a life of its own outside the brain of human beings. In contrast to this, we have this other quote, which is more aligned by Anthony Webster. As linguistic anthropologists, we do disservice to the speakers of languages if we neglect the feelings they have towards their own language. So this is more where we are now in the last maybe 35 years, I would say 40 years, where there was a shift from looking at language as something completely objective that lies outside the brain of the human beings, right? And now we understand that the way we do things with languages is actually mediated by emotions to a great extent in many contexts, right? So I'm going back to our anti-manual. So one of the I would say emotive features that is very salient in this manual from the very beginning, from the outside, from the outset, the team of authors indicate that this is a manual that is meant to subvert how we do this, how we do things with the language in Spanish, and so they engage in this conversation where they not only do this is an interesting manual because the prose that they use is very accessible to any reader. The book makes reference to the university community, so clearly they had in mind a reader that was very close to them, which is the students at the university, at the Autonomous University, National Autonomous University of Mexico. And also, probably they were thinking about a potential reader who is not a specialist in linguistics, who is not somebody at the university, but who would be interested in understanding what is happening with this conversation. So solidarity definitely is an emotion that pervades the entire handbook. Also notice the depiction of the first letter on the cover, right, where clearly elicits this connection in our minds with anarchism, with dissension, with anything that interrogates, right, the status, the current status quo. So when you read the text, also you see that you notice that there are like 4 themes that go around this notion of solidarity. One is a recurrent reference to collective responsibility, right? So they say at some point in the manual that the use of the first that inclusive language and changing the language is a shared effort. So they talk about shared effort. They also talk about inclusion. This is definitely a very, very prominent element in their narrative. The mention of women, non-binary people, dissident identities. All these are all phrases that are recurrent in the manual. Also, the notion of mutual support. So they realize and they mention that probably there's going to be 3 types of readers that are going to approach this manual. And so they mentioned, so there are going to be those who fear feeling inadequate when using a proposed new gender-neutral element, for instance, as they propose in the manual. There's going to be those who fear the loss of unimagined pure state Spanish language, right? And there's going to be those who, of course, are going to experience delight, right, at the prospect of perhaps seeing some tangible changes in the Spanish language. And the 4th element related to solidarity is the connection with social movements. So the team of authors realize that this handbook does not operate is not going to operate in isolation. It's actually the result of a larger conversation that is happening beyond the Spanish-speaking community worldwide. All right, so in addition to this emotion of solidarity, of community, right, that is sensed in this manual. We also, they also present the information in a kind of like game-like. They actually say at the beginning of the book that their book is a word game. So they say, in a way, what they're trying to, I think, convey with this notion of word game is that language in the end does not lie outside the brain of a human being. It's actually the creation of a human being. We create the language, we engineer the language, and the language can be re-engineered, right? And in that spirit, you're going to see in this book words like preambula. Preambula actually is not a word yet in the dictionary. The word would be preambulo, which is preamble, right? You also see, these are pages actually, facsimile pages from the book. I just eliminated the bigger text and I left only the headings so that you guys would not get distracted. So they have this playful way of inverting the title of this particular page. And they continue with epiloga, which again is not a word yet in the dictionary. It's epilogo, epilogue, right, in English. And we have vocabularia as well. Again, it's not yet a word in Spanish in officially. And we have lexica as well. So they are, you know, it's a word game. The book, because of the colorful design that you just saw, because of these word games, is gonna elicit delight, anxiety in some, depending on the reader, curiosity as well. So this is just to indicate to you how, in this particular work, looking at language while intersecting with emotion is absolutely a must, because otherwise you cannot really understand the message that these authors are trying to deliver. So I'm going to conclude with the back cover of the book. So, so the Anti-Handbook aims to contribute to emotional socialization. I think that the authors are aware that an effective way of changing the language at this point in the conversation is to get people emotionally engaged with this goal, or this possible goal in this conversation at the very least, right? It appeals to the emotions of both those who resist language change and those who favor it. This work is an invitation to consider the proposed arguments and new language practices in Spanish, including morphological innovation. In the spirit of the words by famous American psychotherapist Daphne Rose Kigma, hold on is believing that there's only a past, but letting go is knowing that there is a future. And so this is the back cover of the book, and they end with these words. This is an excerpt of the words, the entire back cover. The Anti-Handbook is not an official document, it's a word game. It offers a handful of specific suggestions that may be a starting point to remind us at each utterance the possibility to name in feminine or masculine key, in gender-neutral key, and in diversity key. Thank you very much, and this is all. Thank you.